Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos, and I've been wondering why Broadway is sometimes known as the Great White Way, when in fact the very meaning of Broadway would suggest it might more accurately be the Great Wide Way. And of course it's not to be mixed up with Moby Dick, the star of Moby Dick the Musical, because that mammal was famously known as the Great White Whale. And the musical never got as far as Broadway, as it was an enormous flop in London's West End. But if it had, the Great White Whale might have made a Great White Wally of itself on the Great White Way. And what a sentence that is. And so, if you haven't realised by now, we are talking today about Broadway. It is still the central point in the world of musical theatre, for right or for wrong, for better or for worse. And it manages to do that thing whereby it is both a legend, a legendary place that produces legendary shows, and a current going concern, where modern shows are still being produced, some of which will hopefully become classics and legendary over time. In fact, only time will tell. But it certainly has a draw for any lover of musical theatre. And Musical Talk presenter Colm Malloy, a composer and songwriter in his own right, was there only recently. And when he came back, he wanted to talk about some of the shows he'd seen. And that is simply what we're going to get this week and next week. Over 2 weeks, we're going to look at recent Broadway shows that you could have seen if you were there in February 2026. And it's a deliciously varied selection. Next week, we'll be talking about Ragtime and a new show, or at least a new show to me, Maybe Happy Ending. It's actually been around since 2016, but only reached Broadway in 2024. But this week we're going to be talking about the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which first came to light in 2005, and also High Spirits, the musicalised version of Blithe Spirit by Noel Coward, although the musical is not, and that first came to Broadway in 1964. So over the next 2 weeks here on Musical Talk, we'll be discussing 4 shows that span the period between 1964 and 2024, and all of which you could have seen if you were in Broadway in February 2026. So, that's what you're getting. Let's get on with it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation today with Colm Malloy as we talk about High Spirits and the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Thos, I have a question for you.
Hello, Colm. What is that question? I'm all ears, which is a most unpleasant facial disfigurement.
What do Fulham, Ealing and Tooting all share in common?
Well, there's an obvious answer. But let us...
Unfortunately, it's only the obvious answer, unless you can think of something.
Well, it's not Jason Robert Brown's Parade, is it? Or is it Broadway?
Yeah, they all have high streets, that's it.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of this week's episode of Musical Talk.
Great. Fulham Hux.
Broadway.
Yes.
I've been to 1 or 2 of those Broadways. Are there others?
I believe so. I've just come back from one.
Really?
The one, as it were.
The Broadway, so the Great White Way, as it's called.
Yes.
Is that because it's well lit, by the way? I've never quite understood that term.
I guess so, and it was definitely great and white when I was there because there'd just been a blizzard.
Oh,
so
literally.
There were piles and piles of snow on the streets, and actually, just this week there's been another blizzard, so I'm considering myself lucky that I went when I went, because I think I would have been stranded there either side.
Didn't Irving Berlin have something to say about that?
About the blizzards?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's no business like snow business.
Oh dear. Yes.
But I'm absolutely fascinated. So how long were you visiting Broadway for?
I was there for 5 days around mid-February. So I got back 2 weeks ago. Yes.
That's really interesting. And I know that you like to go to Broadway periodically, and I also know I'm always very impressed by the way you cram in as many shows as you can, many of which are, of course, musicals.
Yes.
I wonder if we might talk about one or two of the ones you saw.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, let's talk perhaps in general terms before we get onto the actual shows. When was the last time you were in Broadway?
It's been pretty much 2 years.
Is it as long as that?
Yeah, 2 years I was last there. Yeah, I try and go every year if I can, but last year it escaped me.
I mean, how quickly do shows turn over? Because in the West End, a musical can stay in the West End for 2 or 3 years. Did you see things advertised that you remember from your last visit?
Oh, that's a good question.
Is longevity a thing on Broadway?
Things do turn over at a quicker rate, I think. And I normally go with the intention of seeing things that I don't think are going to make it over to London. That's my. I mean, it's the same when we go to the Fringe. I think I like to see the more esoteric stuff and the bigger stuff as well. But
not that much does come from Broadway. It's one of the great myths.
Not always. No.
I've been waiting for a Broadway How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying for years. It just doesn't come over.
No. Yeah. So that I usually go with those intentions of seeing something that feels specific to New York, and I think I hit the mark with all the shows I saw this time at least.
And anything else that you noticed about the, whether it's physical or?
Well, it tends to be the quietest time of year tourist-wise whenever I go. So I've been at different times of the year, and if you're ever in the mind to go to New York, January and February is a great time, I'd say. They have this scheme called Broadway Week, which actually lasts for about 3 weeks, where a large number of Broadway houses half the prices of their tickets.
Oh yes, like London Theatre Week, which is actually twice a year, isn't it? I think.
It was actually.
I think runs for a fortnight.
So, any real differences between when I was there last and now? I mean, we'll get into it, but the audiences that I experienced were different and perhaps more vocal than what I've been used to. And I know this is a show dedicated to musicals, but I don't think we can avoid
context.
Sure, political situations that we're all going through. I didn't detect an air of that in New York itself, but in the theatre I definitely did. All those resonances hit in a different way, which they don't normally hit me, but
that's quite interesting. So it was overt enough to spot.
Yeah, I think it affected me differently as a tourist. I mean, I'd be curious to know what it would be like for a local, as it were.
A New York person who goes a lot.
Yeah. But there were lots of tourists from other parts of America. I remember being sat in several shows and the people next to me being from California and the people next to me being from Boston. So, New York remains to be the place that tourists from inside and out, within and without America, go to.
The reason I was asking, because I've noticed recently, paying a bit more attention to the West End, that there's been a trend for the last few years, and I think we've all spotted it, particularly in musicals, of things being based on films. That now seems to be the principal source of new material for musicals. But actually it seems to be happening across the West End in theatrical terms. It suddenly looks like the West End is now just an enormous hall of mirrors made up of adaptations of films. And I've noticed it really strongly in the last few months, actually. I think there's been a real revving of that up, I assume, as the economic situation makes surefire winners and the nearest you can get to that being the order of the day. But it just adds to that horrible conservative, by which I mean small c conservative, attitude that the West End, I fear, sometimes gives across. Not very radical, not very exciting, not very broad, and even new stuff is old stuff dressed up. So I don't know if you saw any of that kind of thing, because obviously, as you say, there's so much more pollination of musicals on Broadway than there is in the West End.
Yeah, I don't think I can even make a
generalisation on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I maintain that things seem to have a higher turnover, which suggests to me that there is at least a drive to put new material.
Yeah. Which is to be commended, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I think the reality of the situation is that nothing new or exciting survives very long.
That is true. Or very rarely, I suppose.
Sure.
Yes. I just say it because on the underground travelling to visit you today, I saw that Waitress was coming back to London, and that's not to say that Waitress isn't a terrific show, but it's Waitress again rather than brand new show for the first time.
Yes.
Which is not to say there aren't brand new shows in London, and I'm not sure I always go to see them, so maybe I'm causing my own situation.
There was a show last year with the fantastic name of Character A and Character B. I think it was. I can't remember what their names were. Carry a cake across
Two
London.
strangers carry a cake across
I have
New
no
York.
idea if it was any good or not. But what a great title, and I should have gone to see it, and I didn't.
Yeah.
So I have no one to blame but myself.
Well, and that's on Broadway at the moment. It seems to be doing okay.
I'd have thought that'd be stale by now. That cake.
Yes, it's the same cake every night. It's a performance art piece.
Yeah. Yes. It's like that skull they pull out of the storeroom when they do new versions of Hamlet, isn't it? It's an actual skull, isn't it? They use.
Yes.
You aware of that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing, I think. There's someone who's been on the West End longer than almost any living actor, I assume, therefore.
Absolutely.
So, that's Broadway in its general sense, and you've trailed interestingly that there's some contextual political stuff, perhaps, which you could feel tangibly, you were saying, but I think we should concentrate on the shows and then see as we discuss them. Now, you've kindly offered up the programmes, as we would call them, or the playbills as they're called over there. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things first of all. Now, what I know about American playbills is that there's a format, and I noticed that several of these follow that format. These sort of the yellow masthead with a sort of a serif font that says playbill, I think registered trademark, and then underneath you get the poster or the symbol of the show.
Sure.
But there's a couple here, which I therefore assume are off-Broadway perhaps, or something like that.
Yes, not all of those shows are Broadway, and in fact I think what determines whether a show is on Broadway or not is whether the venue itself, I think it's based on seating capacity, although I could be wrong.
Oh, is that true? Oh.
Yeah.
So presumably you've got to have a minimum number.
I think so. I think it's something like 500. I could be wrong. You're going to
Yes.
have people writing in droves, furious that
Yes.
I've misinformed your audience. But yes, I think even though that first one that you're looking at, High Spirits, I think is weirdly considered a Broadway venue, but it isn't per se.
No, nor is it passé. And
Yes.
let me name, you've mentioned the show, it's High Spirits.
Yes.
Now, this, of all the covers of the programmes you've got in front of me, is by far the most stylish. I'm going to read it out. It's got a lovely bit of sort of Art Deco patterning at the top. Then it says, New York City Centre. I can't help but notice the Americans often spell that wrongly. Encores, exclamation marks, so that long tradition of musicals with exclamation marks continues. But the show itself is High Spirits.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful image of a very dainty hand holding up what I would think of as a triangular cocktail glass, and the ellipse that you would see looking up through the glass, the oval, is the eye of a rather arch woman, and the words High Spirits are the hair, and that of course I assume is a representation of Elvira, the dead wife, because High Spirits is the musical version of Blithe Spirit, one of the great Noel Coward pieces.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to tell you what little I know about it. It's a 60s show, I think.
This musical.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
The original one. And I'll tell you how I stumbled across it. I stumbled across it sort of by accident, because I fell in love with Noel Coward and all his works as a teenager, which tells you I was a very strange teenager. Mm-hmm. You remember I was a strange teenager who had also fallen in love with Gilbert and Sullivan, so you can see what I was doing. But I delighted in the works of Noel Coward, all of them, drama, comedy and short stories and songs. Still listen to Noel Coward songs for pleasure. Sorry, Mr. Sondheim, I know he considers... He's not a great fan of Noel Coward's lyrics, as far as I can see.
I think he finds them a bit unfunny.
Yes.
In a way.
What with him not being a 1920s British person.
Yes.
Yes, but that's a discussion for another day. But I was working my way through the pantheon of Coward works, and I think it's fair to say that his greatest years were the 20s, the 30s, but there was a lot of great stuff after the war. And then, of course, his musicals continued, I think, amazingly into the 60s. And he wrote 2 musicals in the 60s. Right at the beginning, there was Sail Away, which is still remembered today. And I saw a London Encore's equivalent, the Forgotten Musicals.
Forgotten Musicals.
Yes, many years ago. And I think I interviewed Henry Luxembourg, who was in it, for Musical Talk, if memory serves. He was a nice man. And I like that score a great deal. And it's also got the song The Bronxville Darby and Joan in it, which I adore, which is very much in that late style of Noel Coward, where he's sort of writing much more for the American audience and almost the cabaret audience. But Bronxville Darby and Joan is about the couple who have been together for many years and they hate one another.
Okay.
And it's it's one of those hilarious we hate each other couple things that you find throughout the 20th century in musical theatre.
Throughout real life as well.
And in real life, yes. Well, there is a kernel of truth somewhat.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's Sail Away, and of course Elaine Stritch is very famously connected with that. Marvellous songs like Why Do the Wrong People Travel? And then there's Noel Coward's actual last show, which is The Man Who Came to Dinner, I think, which didn't do terribly well. And unfortunately, there's a song in it, the best song in it is a kind of patter song in a very Noel Coward way, about the sort of the leader of this, the king or president, no, I think it's a king, a sort of hereditary prince of this sort of Middle European state, who tells a story about how all his family were assassinated. It's a comic song, but of course in 1963-64 America, that didn't sit very well. And so the song had to be cut, and the problem is it's one of the best songs in the score. So it never really manifested, and that it's sort of lost to history, funnily enough, much more than I would have said High Spirits. But then I found in the record High Spirits, and I thought, oh, is this Noel Coward's last musical? But of course, and here's the surprise, Noel Coward is very alive in the 1960s and still creatively active, and yet it's his story, his fabulous play, the comedy Blithe Spirit, and yet it's musicalised by somebody else. And so for me it is, if you like, the phantom Noel Coward musical that isn't by Noel Coward.
Interesting.
At the very end of Noel Coward's creative career. So I assume he had a finger in it. I don't actually know that. But he isn't the writer of the music at all, is he? Or the adaptation?
No.
So that's what I know, and that is the extent of what I know. And I now need someone who saw it only recently in America to tell me what they thought of it.
Okay.
And what did you know about it in advance?
I knew nothing other than it was a musical adaptation of Blithe Spirit.
Yeah.
That was about it. I mean, when I found out it was written by Hugh Martin, who I didn't realise had written things like the Trolley Song and those great 1940s Judy Garland scores, basically. So you asked me, what did I know? That was pretty much it. I knew Blithe Spirit. I don't know if you'd seen Angela Lansbury.
When she came to London?
Yes.
Indeed, one of the few occasions I did give a standing ovation. I don't often do that in the
Shocking.
theatre. Yes.
Yes, it was almost, I think it was the first time I ever witnessed a London audience applaud someone walking on stage.
Yes, which is so rare. It almost doesn't happen here, does it? No.
Yeah, so that was my initiation with the play. So,
have you ever seen the film with Margaret Rutherford as Madame Argante? Or you'd love that. And
So
I saw it with Penelope Keith at the Savoy some years beforehand as well.
Oh.
So it's a regular visitor to London, the original Blithe Spirit.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I knew nothing, but really what whetted my appetite was seeing that it had not been on either Broadway or the West End since 1964.
Which is its original run, isn't it? More or less. Yes.
And listeners, that is the kind of thing that really whets my appetite.
Yeah.
And it's coming back to what we were saying, the chance to see something that's not been seen in 62 years, that probably, and this isn't to discredit the production, because actually what I saw was great, but the show itself, it's an old show. It's a traditional show. It really is harking back to the 40s more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it was written at the very end of the 30s, beginning of the 40s, and I think Blithe Spirit we're talking about here.
Sure.
In terms, I seem to remember that it was one of the very few shows that was still being performed in London because the theatres closed during the war and the Blitz.
Okay.
So it's got some important cultural connection to that kind of, stiff upper lip British people during the Second World War thing, which is actually true because people did go to the theatre to see it. I can't quite remember. It's either that or the film came out during the war in order to get people into the cinema, so they had theatre. It's one, but it's certainly absolutely associated with the war in this country. Yet it isn't a war film at all.
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, it's a cultural artifact from the 30s or 40s, isn't it? Yes.
So yes, I somehow don't think it's going to live on, as it were.
Can I just briefly make there was a resonance here then with Sail Away, because when Sail Away opened, I think in 61, the reviewers did that slightly double-handed thing. So they said Mr. Coward has written the hit show of 1938. It's 1961.
Gosh.
I think that's a very near quotation of what one of the reviews said. And I think that's interesting because that is sort of Coward's highest point. Interesting that Blithe Spirit, which is such from the same period essentially, in that sense, or 30s, late 30s, early 40s. It's interesting that he tried musicalising a modern show, but it sounded like a 30s show by Coward. This is a play by Coward, musicalised by someone else who you've identified as being most famous for his 40s songs.
Yes.
I suppose it's always going to feel a little bit backward rather than forward. In 1964.
Yes, it still has a kind of, the 60s dance club feel to it in its orchestration. But what I didn't realise was that Noel Coward was so delighted by the Broadway production, he directed the London production, which starred Dennis Quilley.
Oh, well, Dennis Quilley went on to be Sweeney Todd.
Yeah, the London. Which I found that quite interesting anyway. So he seemed very pleased by it, which isn't always the case with playwrights having their work adapted into musicals.
Particularly when you could do it yourself, because Coward could have. Oh, well, I mean, in a way, that's the best thumbs up you can have from the author, to say, this is sufficiently good, I want to be connected with it.
What's also interesting is, if you look hard enough on YouTube, there is a semi-pro shot recording of, I think it's the 1994 Monterey State, I don't think it's a university, it must be some kind of theatre group putting on High Spirits.
So here's my question.
Yes.
Did any of the songs escape into the public consciousness? How good is it as a musical in terms, I mean, you said it feels a little bit backward looking, but was it successful despite being a bit backward looking?
It was the show I was most looking forward to see, and it was my favourite of all the shows I'd seen. I think maybe there's one other that comes close.
So why is that? Is it just because of the quality of the narrative and the book, or is it the score? Did the score help?
It's not the strongest book. It's pretty much Blithe Spirit.
Yeah.
That's been doctored a little bit and some songs interpolated. That's not to discredit the book writer, but that kind of is what you're getting, I think, at least.
So it really is a musicalised version of Blithe Spirit, more or less.
Yeah, I think so.
Still set in Britain?
Still set in Britain. And what's interesting is that the songs are brilliant. They have a touch of what I know Jeremy Sams would call "I'm bored now," which isn't to say that they're not great songs, but after about the 2.5 minute mark, you go, I see, this is the song.
It hasn't got enough to propel.
We're not going any further.
Yeah.
Which kind of what I mean by saying it feels a little bit 40s is that they're not doing I guess they're not even doing the Roger Hammerstein of having the song serving a dramatic purpose. I mean, they do serve a dramatic purpose, but they're often one note. The character isn't journeying through the song, as it were. No. The song is the state of being, and that's it.
So it's still pre-Rodgers and Hammerstein in its stylings.
Yes.
Which is no bad thing as far as I'm concerned, particularly for a comedy, but I can understand that an audience by 1964 might have been expecting something a little further.
And it's missing one other thing for me, which is you've got your lead couple who are hosting a soiree that evening that Madame Arcati is going to attend. What's missing, for me at least, is a song that gets the ball rolling.
Oh, right.
I think with Blithe Spirit, the pretense is Madame Arcati is coming, but with a musical, I think the stakes are slightly different in that we need to kind of see whose story are we following, and actually a song doesn't materialise until much later on in the first scene, which is kind of unrelated. Well, I say that the heroine character, whose name escapes me, sings a song about Elvira, and she sings, was she cleverer than I, wittier than I, and I guess she was probably prettier than I. So it's kind of, there's a jealousy for someone who's dead anyway. That's the impulse of the song.
So this is the anti West Side Story song. This is I Feel Unpretty.
Yes. All of that is to say, the songs are great, and one song you won't hear on any of the cast recordings, but you can hear it on that pro shot from 1994, is something like "Come on down to Madame Arcati's coffee shop, just a few steps from Sloane Square.
Oh,
come and meet the spirits there." And Madame Arcati runs this coffee shop. I can't remember if it happens in Blithe Spirit. Anyway.
Well, no, I mean, you never see her at home, I don't think.
No, she has a coffee shop near Sloane Square, and all of these kind of hippie, young, new wave people hang out there.
Now, that is obviously a connection to the 60s. It's certainly not in the original. And, of course, what says, in British culture at least, coffee, sort of frothy Italian coffee.
Yes.
We would call cappuccino, but all our parents would have called espresso, not espresso.
Yes.
My parents still call frothy coffee espresso.
Of course.
When the machines first were imported, they were originally imported in from Italy in the mid-50s because Tony Hancock was doing a television sketch series in about 1956 on ITV. And there's a sketch about him with one of these newfangled coffee machines. So for the next 10 years, coffee shops are really youth culture. And youth culture by 1964, certainly when Britain was just about starting to swing. After 1963, that's really the first knockings of it. So it's interesting you say hippies. That would be a little bit later, but this idea of the cool set,
Yes.
hanging out with a slightly older guru kind of character, is very 60s, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sounds and an imposition upon Madame Arcati's character that you wouldn't have seen in the 40s, but I suppose makes it contemporary in the 60s sense. So interesting what you're saying.
I think in a way they're trying to make it slightly contemporary to the 60s. There's a song prior to this anyway that she has a song about being on her bike. And that's your introduction to her, and it is brilliantly I should also say we are darting around, but Encore's productions are semi-staged concert readings.
Yeah.
So they're there with music stands and they've got folders with the script.
It's a stage reading in that
But
sense.
as time has gone on and as these things have become more and more popular, they used to be 4-night runs, they're now 2 weeks. They are now more semi-staged. Yeah. And so Madame Arcati in this, played by Andrea Martin, comes out on a bike that has a music stand attached to it.
Marvellous.
And the gears are... It seems to be kind of on a platform of its own, so she's actually able to ride the bike, and she's got her music stand, and she's singing. It's brilliant, and she's singing about being on her bike and how much she loves it. And then you have the chorus all coming on their own individual bikes as well. It's just great fun, and that's your introduction to her. So that's different from the play, in which your introduction to her is when she arrives. Yeah. And she talks about, I had a sudden presentiment that I was going to have a flat tyre, and so I had to go back home and get my bicycle pump.
Which she does mention.
It's
original script.
That is original script. But that's preceded with a song about how much she loves her bike. Which is then... She has a second song in the second half called Talking to You, in which she's in bed with her Ouija... As she calls it, her Ouija board. Making amorous remarks to it.
Oh... right, so this is quite a rework. I don't see Margaret Rutherford doing that. I see Margaret Rutherford on a bicycle. I can't see Margaret Rutherford in a nightie in an enormous bed.
Yeah.
Flirting with the dead.
Sure.
Which would be a great name for a song, though.
It would be, Flirting with the Dead. But no, all of this is to say the songs are great. I think the Coward-esque comedy fell a little bit flat in the sense that we could see that they were reading from scripts. There's something that's
the spontaneity
there.
Isn't there? Therefore,
it's not quite there. So there were some awkward moments, and then actually the presence of Elvira when she remanifests herself. Again, semi-stage production. It's quite hard to make those things look.
Yeah. Because there's supposed to be a shock of books flying off a shelf and things like that, isn't there?
Yeah, there were little bits of that, but actually I think the show needs to lean into the camp to get anything feel right, as it were. But I was going to ask you, when was the last time you were, or have you ever been called a guttersnipe?
I have never been called a guttersnipe, but the word is not without currency.
No.
I have heard it used in conversation.
Have you?
Not common.
I'm happy to bring it back in.
Oh, please do.
Yes, it was...
usually with the word common.
Common guttersnipe. Okay,
or great. Common little guttersnipe.
Common little guttersnipe.
Yes.
Anyway, I just thought I'd ask. The other thing I found interesting, and here's a fun game I'd like to play. 1964 is when High Spirits opened. It was nominated for Best Musical.
Was it?
Shall we play a game of what other musicals were nominated for
in 64?
In 64. It's such an interesting year, and I think this plays into why this musical has, I think for the most part, been forgotten.
Oh, forgotten it has, yeah. Crikey. Okay, for 64. Well,
It surprised me. It's a good year.
Is it? Right. Are there any last knockings of Rodgers and Hammerstein?
No.
Fine, so it's a bit after their time, really, isn't it? Cole Porter was... I think he died in 64.
He died in 64.
Yeah.
God, it was a busy year.
So we are, in Sondheim's terms,
yes.
This is... Anyone Can Whistle is not 64, is it?
It is.
Is it now?
Same year, but did not get nominated for... It was totally snubbed. It got one nomination for Best Choreography.
But it failed, didn't it? I mean, there's no doubt that it failed big time when it opened.
Yes.
More's a pity. Right, so that's knocking around that year, but it's not being nominated. Right. Was there any other Sondheim lyric shows? Gypsy's not around in 64? No. That's earlier, isn't it?
Yes. Let me help you out there. There's a Bockenharnik.
Ah. It's not She Loves You.
It's She Loves Me.
She Loves Me.
Yes.
which is a beautiful show.
Yes.
And it's a show I've grown to love more and more and more as I've got older. I think it's terrific. So that's one of them.
Yes.
Gosh, I'm trying to think.
Sorry,
No British ones, all Americans, I guess, obviously.
All American.
Yeah.
There is a Julie Stein musical.
Oh, right, okay. Well, if it wasn't Gypsy, it's not Bells Are Ringing or something like that, is it? That's not him anyway, is it?
Sure.
Yeah, go on, you're going to have to put me out of my misery.
Funny Girl.
Funny Girl.
And there's a Jerry Herman.
Now, 64 we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's Hello Dolly.
It's Hello Dolly.
Is it Hello Dolly?
Funny Girl, Hello Dolly, She Loves Me, and High Spirits are all nominated for Best New Musical.
So the Hello Dolly production, which was in London in 24, was an anniversary.
It was, that's true, I didn't think of
60th anniversary. Golly gosh. I'm genuinely surprised at that. I think that's absolutely fascinating. Yes, you're right. That's a good year even with the stuff that didn't place.
Yeah, it's a
hanging around in the background.
And also weirdly, I mean, I don't want to say feminist, but they're all kind of
Funny
female,
Girl is a good show.
They're female heavy shows.
Yeah. Anyone Can Whistle, definitely.
Yeah, and High Spirits.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I found it really curious.
Because now I don't think the Beatles have got America quite yet, have they? When the Beatles starting
later 60s.
Well, I think it was more like mid 60s because they do become the screaming stuff starts picking up in America, and you start hearing the very sort of straight-laced comedians starting to talk about the Beatles as a punchline. They end up in sitcoms and things like that, and Alan Sherman starts making references to them in his comedic songs. I should have tried to have said earlier. So it's quite a rich period, actually, in popular culture, full stop.
Yes.
I mean, I'd kill for a list like that now, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
That's terrific. I've got a few questions for you about High Spirits, if I may. The first is facetious. They don't attempt to musicalise Little Tommy Tucker, do they? Does Madame Arcati use... Because Little Tommy Tucker is such an obscure nursery rhyme, even now in Britain, that when she sings Little Tommy Tucker sings for his supper, what shall he have but brown bread and butter? And then she goes on to say, it doesn't rhyme, of course, but it's doggerel, but the boy seems to love it.
Gosh, I will have to go and remind myself. I remember that being sung, but whether I remember it being sung in a throwaway way or if it was set, I think it was just a throwaway.
I suspect. Because ironically, if it was a Bedknobs and Broomsticks style musical... Oh, hang on, when was Mary Poppins? That's 65, isn't it?
Something like that.
But that's brewing up at the time as well, gosh.
It's a good decade.
It really jolly well is, yes. But the point is, I think that... I think you could have... I haven't seen the show, but, I think if I'd been writing it, I could have made a song of that, because actually that's the introduction to her spirit medium, and that's really important for her, even if the conceit is that you can hear... when she can hear the song that she's singing, but somehow the guests can't, which would be a fabulous way of doing it. But
the way that's done is there are songs that are being written for the show that are then pre-recorded, and then they are played on the vinyl, as it were. I can't remember the names of them specifically, but yeah, they're...
And then the other thing, and I just want to pick up on something you said earlier, actually, which was interesting, that you said it took a while for the songs to arrive. So my question is a joint question, because I agree with you. I think if you were musicalising Blithe Spirit, which is such a strong comedy, with such a history already, and a sort of legendary writer really, who's still alive, goodness, in 1964, you've got to impose yourself on it, because otherwise it will impose itself on you.
Yes.
And therefore a song at the beginning, because the way the Coward thing works, the Blithe Spirit, it sort of slowly builds up in a way that drawing room comedies often do. They start from nowhere and then build up to a kind of gentle farce. If you can impose a Broadway-style song about everyone's coming to dinner, or whatever it is, you've then at least said that you've opened the show on your terms, not on the terms of the original play.
Yeah.
So here's my secondary question arising from that, which is, did the score get overwhelmed by the Coward, or did the book get overwhelmed by the score, or did they get the balance right, in your opinion?
The second half was stronger, I think, because the wheels were in motion by then. I think it's a really hard machine to start up.
It is.
The overture is brilliant, and I urge everyone to go and listen to it, because you can listen to the original Broadway cast overture on YouTube. And then for me, that first scene was just a little bit too long before we get the first song, which is a solo song by the lead female character, and it's a pleasant enough song. But actually, I think by that point I thought, God, we've not had a song yet.
Which means you're well in the world of Coward, not in the world of the score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's one other change. This is not in the 1994 video that I've seen. They have a character called Noel Coward sort of narrating the evening. I guess because it's a concert production. So maybe there's that other level that just they should have got rid of, perhaps, in my opinion. But
no to Noel.
Yeah.
And then there's a parallel question to that, which is, we've already spoken about her considerably, Madame Arcati. Yes. Now, the great thing about Blithe Spirit is it's a marvellous piece, as we mentioned with Angela Lansbury, all pronunciations are available, which is actually the amount of time Madame Arcati has in Act 1 and Act 2 is tiny. She comes on and steals the scene for about 20 minutes in Act 1, and she comes on and steals the scene for about 20 minutes in Act 2. She's not in it a lot. It's a lot for why you often get really fabulous, eccentric old actresses, I'm using that term deliberately, waiting in the green room for most of the show to come out, steal the show, go back in again, and then take all the applause at the end and a standing ovation at the beginning and end if you're British, as it happens. And that's fine. And that's great, and it works because you don't want too much Madame Arcati in the piece, because it's actually a drawing room comedy, and you need her as the agent of chaos, but also the resolution, or sort of resolution, to come in and out. She can't be one of the main characters in it, but she's such a delicious character in all her permutations. I've never seen an actress fail, from Margaret Rutherford onwards, and you can do it differently as well. But it's such an eccentric character. There's lots of scope in that character. If you were adapting the piece, it is tempting to expand that character and expand that character and expand that character until she takes over and it becomes the Madame Arcati show, which would be fabulous to watch but would not be Blithe Spirit. So you can see what my question is does the show allow itself the self-discipline to keep Madame Arcati a really intoxicating ingredient, or does it become Madame Arcati and the High Spirits?
No, it doesn't become that. She has 4 songs, 2 in each half, but they are quite self-contained, I think.
Which she sort of is. She's an insular character in a strange way.
How do I say that? She has the bicycle song, as we know. She has Go Into Your Trance.
Oh, yes.
Which I know what...
Which, of course...
You can tell that's... That joke didn't land with
it wouldn't
the audience.
anymore.
No, I know. I was sad for that, because I think it's quite funny.
Yeah.
So she's a bit of a send-up character, and then she has her Ouija board song, and then she has another song called Something Is Coming to Tea. I can't remember what's going on at that point. Anyway.
But that's also a resonance with The Man Who Came to Dinner. So there's which was Coward's last musical, only a year or two before, possibly even almost contemporaneously. So that may be meaningful.
She is expanded, but I think she's contained within her little cameos.
So she's there's more of her, but she's still... I love that. Yeah, so she's contained. Because are those songs, for the most part, solos?
Yes.
That really sums up her character.
With ensemble.
Of course, yeah.
Doing dance.
Oh, yes. Bicycle breaks,
yeah.
Well, every good bicycle needs brakes. That's really interesting, and probably the right way of doing it then. So they've allowed themselves a little opportunity to expand her up a bit. But she still has to be a character on her own. Yes. She's not, I use the word team player, she's not part of the collaborative effort of the piece. She's the dynamo of the farce, therefore she's not one of the characters in the farce.
Agent of chaos.
Yes.
Yeah, she is that.
Yeah.
She is the one that causes the chaos of the story, but then she helps to bring it all back together, I suppose. Yeah.
And it's also interesting because even going back to the original Blithe Spirit compatibility, the initial couple who are having the dinner party, you see them in their cars. They all drive around in these beautiful 1930s cars in the film and on the stage play. Okay. And of course, ultimately, there's a car crash. Spoilers. But whereas Madame Arcati turns up on a rickety old bicycle and everyone's worried for her health. But ironically, she's safer than the cars. So she's an outsider in that sense as well. The sophisticated world of 1920s, 1930s, 1940s Britain, the drawing room set, if you like, is deemed to be sophisticated and smooth, and yet are in more danger than this very strange character who lives very clearly on the fringes is in fact being brought to dinner to be made fun of.
Yes.
They're not there because they appreciate what she's doing. and therefore ultimately she is the one who, it turns out, has got her feet on the ground. It's a wonderful character. I mean, it's a great piece.
Absolutely.
So that's High Spirits.
That's High Spirits.
So any final words on that? Would you see it again if it were to be shown in London? Would you come?
Absolutely, I would not miss it.
Yeah. High praise for High Spirits.
Indeed.
So that is a 60s piece.
Yes.
That doesn't often get revived. But I think the next show that you want to talk about today is a show that I think is having such a vogue, and has done more or less since it first arrived on Broadway, and indeed everywhere in London. It's a show that we see in Edinburgh a lot. It's a show that comes to London periodically.
It's very popular with universities and schools.
It is. It's a show that somehow has really tapped into, in terms in Britain at least, is more popular than you would thought it ever would be, because we do not have the thing that the show is about in this country. I want you to say what the name of the show is, so I'm not stealing your thunder. But it's about a particular thing which seems very American or transatlantic to me,
yes,
but is not really a fixture of British culture at all.
No.
So the show is...
We're talking about the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee.
We are. Which is presumably a sequel to the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling...
A.
Quite.
Yeah, this was in an off-Broadway venue, but not too far from the street Broadway itself. It's in Midtown Manhattan. It's called the New World Stages, and it's an underground venue where they have lots of different performance venues. I think they're doing Heathers in the theatre.
They are entirely doing Heathers because it's in the programme.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I'd never seen a production of this. My sixth form college did a production of it whilst I was there.
You've never seen a production?
I'd never seen it, but I knew the show. My sixth form had done a production of it, and I played the piano for it.
How did you avoid it in Edinburgh? It's on every year, not often in more than one production.
I've always wanted to see it.
I must, yeah. Well, I'll take you to see a British production. Go on.
And it's great. I mean, really, it's the cast are great. It's a really fun show, and the concept of getting audience members involved is neat too. And
getting rid of them when they're too clever.
Yeah, but I also wonder if that blessing is also its curse, because the show, as much as I love it, suffers from a curious, I find, lethargy. Once the nature of the show is booted off the audience members,
when we're down to the characters as written,
you feel a sense of the playfulness of the show, although it is playful. There's something. Do you know what I mean? There's something missing once they're gone.
Well, I know what you mean, and I think that's the cultural difference, because
we don't have that.
We don't have it here, so there's no one has any investment in British culture in a spelling bee, because we don't have spelling bees. When I was a schoolboy, we would have occasional spelling tests, as they were called, on vocabulary, both in English and in foreign languages, but they were never called spelling bees. It was nothing competitive. The idea of having a kind of league, that seems alien. That's not how it works in Britain. And I think because none of us have been through it ourselves, it's hard to have that empathy, which I suspect in a lot of people in America, particularly, if I may say, the nerd end of the non-sporty end of the market, who are also going to have, presumably, and this is generalisation, a large overlap in the Venn diagram of school activities with the theatre crowd, i.e. the non-sporty kids do other things.
Yes.
Which is why in Britain, non-sporty kids go off and do the electronics club or the computer club or chess club or amateur dramatics or whatever it is. So I wonder if actually there's a huge nostalgia dose being given to an American audience which we're not getting. Did you get the sense that... So I agree with you. I think lethargy isn't quite the right word, but I agree. But in terms of dynamic, the dynamic is set and all you're doing is going through it, might be the nicest way of describing it. But did you find the audience were emoting in a different way to you on that? And by the way, I think we should both say, because I love it, I don't think it's a detrimental element to it. I really I'm carried away by the character. I've grown to like those characters.
Sure.
But all they are doing is going through who's dropping out one by one.
Yes. It's a good question. I think the audience were really on the side of the show, and it was such a mix of an audience. Of all the shows I saw, it was young and old, really.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes. Cast were great. What's interesting is I know the show and I know the songs, and they're all great fun. One of the audience spellers was the former press secretary for the White House. Her name escapes me, but
by chance.
Yes,
yeah, just sitting in the audience that day.
And she was great, and a really good team player. But
could she spell?
She could spell.
I should hope so for a press office.
Of course. But this, coming back to what we were talking about earlier with context, this is where context started to creep into the show in a way that I didn't expect. And the Logan Schwarzenegger character has a political streak to her.
Yes. She's sort of radical.
Yeah,
isn't she?
She is.
A broad term.
And she gets on her soapbox at a few points. And it wasn't to the detriment of the show, but she gave a kind of tirade speech about the state of America at the moment.
But as written in the text, it's not a new, or was it a new?
That I don't know. It felt pertinent to now, which leads me to think that it had been
updated in some way.
Sure.
Or pointed.
Which I don't think I have an issue with.
Well, theatre does have that right.
Sure. I found myself being... You talking about nostalgia, I think I'm circling around various points which I'll end up getting to, but what's interesting is seeing a show about children, mostly, played by adults, and feeling that difference, but then also seeing this show about children and how the social dynamics we experience now actually manifest in a really early age, and what I'm going to use the word moved by, because I didn't expect myself to feel moved by spelling bee, but I think the strong...
M-O-V-E-D, moved. Carry on.
The strongest moments, and I think the strongest characters for me, are the ones where you get to see their relationship with their parents, and...
Or not, in some cases, yeah.
And obviously, I think the emotional climax is the I Love You song that Olive sings, where she is essentially imagining what her parents, and idealised, which is very moving. But I was most moved by the song Woe Is Me that Logan sings, and whether it's how it was played, but her two dads, the way they were portraying this, they're really cutthroat and horrible to her. And she's a trophy daughter. She is, and her having given that speech, and us having the former press secretary on stage, and then her first line in that song being, "I hope you can love me, America," that had a really weird... It hit in a really strong way, which I didn't expect. And then obviously when she gets booted off and she goes... I can't remember what the exact line is, but she does say something like, "I hope you can still love me, America. I know you." But she's learned to fail, hasn't she? So but she's for a British audience, that's her redemption. Yes, oddly, but do carry on. But how she says America hates losers, and she kind of goes, "Well, I am one too," and I guess the implication is America now hates me. All of that is to say, bringing the context into the room in that show, I felt really worked in a way I didn't expect it to. And it got me thinking about, shows like Assassins or shows like Ragtime, which we'll talk about, where America is front and centre, or even Pacific Overtures, America is there in the background, but America is a character in a way. I didn't expect to feel like America was a character of Spelling Bee, and yet it did. That's a really interesting phrase, America is a character. But can I ask you a couple of questions? Yes. Because it sounds like circumstances were such that by chance you went on the night when there was someone from obliquely the world of politics, not a politician per se, but someone so close to the centre of power only recently. So that is something. You're also seeing it in America, which is something I haven't seen. So of course when I see it, I generally see it with a British cast doing it in Britain. We all stood for the pledge. Sorry to interrupt you. The Pledge of Allegiance at the start of the show. Sorry, I've completely ruined your thought. No, you haven't ruined my thought. You surprised me, because obviously that doesn't happen in Britain unless you're asked to by the audience, in which case it's all by the people on the stage, in which case it's knowing. Yes, we all stood and we made we Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And I was one of two people in the audience who did not know the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, why? But you're not American. No, so. But I got talking vaguely to the family to my right, and they turned to us at that moment, and they kind of gave a knowing, "Oh, sorry, I guess you don't know this bit," but they all reeled it off.
You see, because that's one of the things. I don't mean this in any way judgmentally, but all that kind of sort of flag flying in classrooms and daily pledge of allegiance in American schools, as I understand it, seems very alien to me. We don't have a British equivalent, and I think most of us would feel madly uncomfortable with that. I certainly would. I don't like overt nationalism.
No, well,
that doesn't warm me at all.
We didn't sing the national anthem at school or anything.
No,
like
we
that.
didn't either. No. I don't sing it. You know, I work for the government in a local government sense. I'm a public servant, but we don't sing the national anthem. The only time I've ever seen the national anthem sung in a work context where I am is during British citizenship ceremonies, when people who are not British wish to become British, and then there's a ceremony that takes place at the town hall, and this takes place across the country, and it always ends with one verse only of God Save the King, with the national anthem, but it's not sung with gusto. Everyone's given a script sheet for a start because they wouldn't necessarily know it.
Sure.
So that I would find that very awkward. I would if I'd been in the audience with you. I mean, I wouldn't be brave enough just to sit there tutting in a very British kind of a way. But you're right. I would find that I would find that really horrible.
It felt fine. The two adult, well, there are three adult characters, but the two adult characters that commandeered us into that, they did it with a sense of fun, so it didn't feel like I was being strong-armed into it.
And they've got to, of course, because they must be aware that, you know, a lot of the audience, if not on that night, on other nights, will not be American nationals.
Yes. I mean, I could even conceive of them playing it in a kind of, oh, here's the thing we've got to do, and they're all doing it begrudgingly, so then the audience feels like they're in that as well. But
can I just say that you've just reminded me of something? Sorry, the British cultural antidote to that, the antithesis, is that historically, right up until about the 60s, at the end of a cinema performance, they would play the national anthem, and famously in this country, at the moment the national anthem started playing on the tape recorder or on the record, people would leave. Almost very few people would stay to sing the national anthem. It was your cue to get out. And there's an episode of Dad's Army where Captain Mannering and the whole platoon I know you've not seen it, but they're sitting there in the cinema in 1940. They've finished watching the film. The national anthem plays, and everyone scrabbles to get out except for Captain Mannering, who is trying to stand up and sing the national anthem. And the next thing you see is he's been crumpled underfoot, and he gets up from behind a seat because everyone else has just trampled over him to get out quickly.
Great.
So I'm not making any point on that, but it just goes to show culturally, when I see it, I'm not getting what you got in your American performance in America, and which takes us back to that point you were saying about the resonances you were detecting in American politics and culture and context.
So I dare say there was a political flavour to the show which I did not expect, and which really threw me. Sounds like I didn't enjoy it. It threw me, and I found myself connecting with the characters in a kind of in a sense of their national identity, as it were. But it also reminded me, you've just reminded me, I have stood for the national anthem in America. When I saw On the Town about 11 years ago, On the Town starts with the Star Spangled Banner.
But that's part of the score, isn't it?
Yes.
But the audience stand for it.
We all stood up. I distinctly remember an American flag is lowered, the orchestra plays the Star Spangled Banner, and we all stood up.
Good Lord.
It's peculiar.
Well, it seems peculiar, doesn't it, to our cultural mores. But I know it's much more important over there. They do seem to emblemise and sort of the iconography of the American emblem seems to be much more resonant than it is in this country.
Yes.
And I would dare say a lot of other Western European countries.
Yes.
However, we're back to the show.
Yes.
Now, those children, it's interesting that the children are an interesting mixture of grotesque caricature and yet somehow manage to get movement, but it's not a send-up. I think their stories are not a send-up in a piece which is sending up or appears to be sending up, or at least riffing on the format, of the spelling bee. So if it's like a send-up of the process with sincere but unreal characters, like
it's cartoonish.
William Barfay.
Yes. Leaf Coney Bear.
Yeah, are such exemplars of taking a real person and then pushing them right to the edges of eccentricity to the point where they might teeter off.
Yeah.
I think William Barfay is the one who's most strange and is sort of portrayed as the most antisocial and the one that's hardest to like, and yet you also are, by the end of it, wrenched into thinking and feeling for him.
Yeah.
You used to get a sense of his damage.
Yes,
As a boy.
his kind of loneliness
Yeah.
and wanting to belong, or kind of wanting attention through winning,
and yet there's the kernel of it's just a small sense, isn't there, that he might be able to make friends with one of the
Olive,
female
yes.
and which is his redemptive moment.
It's hard because I think I watched that show and there are other people I think I'd prefer to win, but that's probably because what I'm watching is someone who's been a little bit mean to everyone that whole time.
Yeah.
And sure, the way you win the spelling bee, it's not a popularity contest, it's about spelling the word correctly, and he won fair and square, I guess.
With the foot!
Yes.
Can I just briefly say that's what I like about the cover?
You've got the... Yeah.
Yeah, on the cover of this rather excellent programme is a trophy.
Yes.
With all the children's hands. You only see arms and hands, except for one foot, which is touching it, and you immediately know. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. But no, it was great, really.
Do you know, but just broadly then, because I've seen it a lot of times and you've now only seen it once, but you've seen it in the place where it was written in the country where they do it, and I've only ever seen British versions of it where by force and necessity the cultural resonances will be different and we have to absorb it in a different way, and it sounds like all my experiences are totally different from yours. That does make me wonder, just on a more broad level, about the success of the show having been able to escape its American trappings when it's performed over here or elsewhere, because it's a big hit.
Yes.
And it really is. It's a great show. It's an ensemble piece as well. No one stands out. It's terribly funny. It's been on in London several times.
Yes,
I saw it at the Donmar, I think.
Okay. It's a strong show. I think it doesn't require the political backdrop, but
it's interesting if it has it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wondered if you were to go and see it again, let's just say randomly in 10 years or even 20 years' time, when things will have moved on, because things always move on, whether it will still have that resonance. Problem is, it would be a period piece by then.
Sure.
Although it's not
would you update
new.
it? I don't know. Yes.
But presumably, as long as they're having spelling bees, it doesn't age that much.
No, that's true.
So that's A+ for spelling bee.
Indeed.
I enjoyed that.
I can't think of any other spelling related jokes.
You don't suffer from daily sex then?
No.
Dyslexia.
Oh, I see. Very good.
Musical talk. Well, there we are. That was Colm Malloy, and he and I were talking about high spirits of the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. Both wonderful but very, very different shows, and it's delightful to hear that they're both being revived, at least in some form. High Spirits is one of those shows which you really ought to see if you can, because it's not produced very often. It wasn't really an enormous success, and indeed, when it came to London after Broadway, it was actually a failure, despite featuring Cicely Courtnidge as Madame Arcati, and as you heard in this programme, being directed by Noel Coward himself. But you can't win 'em all, as they say. Well, do join us again next week when we'll be continuing this conversation, and we'll be talking about ragtime and maybe happy ending. Once again, very, very different shows. One looking backwards and one looking very much forwards. But for the time being, I think all we can actually do is look forwards. I look forward, hopefully, to you joining us for next week's episode of Musical Talk, or whenever. But until then, it's time for me to say goodbye. So, I've been Thos Ribbits. This is Musical Talk. Pip pip. This episode of Musical Talk presented by Colm Malloy and Thos Ribbits. Edited by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2026. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk. Or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favourite podcasts. And follow us on all the usual social media networks.